Well, the day is almost done. Irene just came up from the studio. She's been sweating in the workshop, her studio, all day long. I'm going to make one of Irene's favorite desserts. I'm going to make some bread pudding. I have some few-day-old bread, which is stale. I have some really old bread. This is really stale. If you'd like to see how I can use this kind of bread to make these kinds of desserts, drop me a note in the comments below and I'll shoot a show about that. Right now, this goes in the trash. To make this bread pudding, I'm going to be making a custard. This custard requires 3 egg yolks. I save the egg whites because Irene will frequently have egg whites for breakfast, or if we do breakfast for lunch or breakfast for dinner or something like that, then I already have them ready. The one thing I will say about commercial eggs is that the shells have been getting thinner and thinner, so it makes it a little bit of a challenge to crack them without having bits of shell go into the egg. That was not too bad. A lot of these egg farms optimize the food for their chickens to minimize their cost, and they do really do that. I don't like it, but that's the way of business. Now this recipe is pretty simple. Egg yolks go in the bowl. My recipe calls for 1/3 to 1/2 cup of sugar. We prefer slightly less sweet desserts. I'm just using 1/3. Whisk that together. Makes a pretty stiff paste. Now the old-fashioned recipe calls for 3 cups of milk. I'm going to use something a little bit different. I'm going to use 1.5 cups of milk. Maybe I'll use 2 cups of milk. I'll use 2 cups of milk. I have enough milk. Now this is a special kind of milk. This is A2 milk from a cow that has A2 genetics. We discovered probably 25 or 30 years ago that the problem that Irene was having with a lot of dairy products didn't exist when we went to Germany or England on business. It was really driven home when we were in Munich on business and there was beer soup on the menu. And Irene said, "This is just too good to pass up. I'm going to have it. And yeah, I might suffer the consequences, but I'm going to try it." So we had beer soup the first night and no problem. And beer soup the second night, no problem. And the third night, you might get the point that she liked the beer soup. Well, so did I too. And I liked the hunter gravy that came with our schnitzel. Great food, a lot of fat, but this led us on the path of finding milk in the U.S. that Irene could eat without having problems. I'm going to go put this away. I need 1 more cup of liquid. That'll be 1 cup of heavy whipping cream. Now if you live in the UK, get some double cream. It does a fabulous job. Whisk this all together. I want to get the sugar all dissolved. I need a teaspoon of vanilla. I'm going to put a little extra in because we like it. I'll get this all whisked up and set aside. Now to make some bread cubes. I'm going to start with this couple-day-old bread, which is stale. It will work just fine. I'm cutting the bread in slices that are about an inch thick. There are a lot of other ways to make bread pudding. I have another bread pudding that I make sometimes. Haven't made it in a lot of years actually, which I toast white bread. And you know, it's one of those things from the 1950s. You cut off the crust of the bread because crust is unsightly. Then you toast the bread, lightly butter it, and sprinkle it with cinnamon sugar. Then you cut triangles, set it in a baking dish, and pour the same kind of custard as I'm making right now. It's surprising how much custard toast or stale bread can take. The objective here is to have between 3 and 5 cups of bread cubes. You don't need to watch me cut all these pieces of bread up. I'll bring you back when that's all done. Now, the old school way of making this bread pudding is to put the bread cubes into the mixture and then ladle it into ramekins. I'm going to do it the opposite way. I'm going to put the bread cubes in here and I'll start ladling the custard filling over it. I have about 4 cups of bread cubes here. That's more than what will fit in these 2 ramekins. So I'll probably make another batch of this bread pudding when this one is done. We'll see. It's going to be amazing how much liquid this bread soaks up. I let the liquid sit for a while on the bread cubes so that it can be absorbed into the bread. Just take your time. And make sure that all the bread gets coated. Now it will suck up, even if you don't get some over the top. But it's better if you can actually get some ladled over each piece of bread. It just wouldn't do to have hard, crusty bread pudding. It's been a hot day. It was 99 degrees outside and 89 degrees in the kitchen. That's not too bad. I've worked in hotter kitchens than that. Now, there's an old saying of, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. Well, that's based on a lot of past history, because it's just impossible to keep a kitchen cool. Alright, we now have the custard in the ramekins, the bread soaking in it. Just pushing the bread down to make sure everything gets soaked completely. Now this bread is stale, so there's a bit of a hard crust on it, and that's why I want to make sure that everything gets fully saturated with the custard filling. Well, that looks good. Now I put the dishes into this pan of hot water. I want the water in the pan to be up about the same height as the custard. It's not quite high enough. I'm going to bring the water level up. That's good. Now comes the tricky part, and I'm going to take this thing and put it in the oven, and it's going to cook for 45 minutes. Slow and easy. You don't want water to go into the custard. And we're safely in the oven. Now I set a timer and wait.